Remember him? Well, if you don't, that's Dwayne Davis, better known as Keefe D. He's the only man ever arrested in connection to the murder of hip hop and rap legend Tupac Shakur. Well, he's in the headlines once again, facing a new charge, one that he got while already in jail. So what happened? Well, this happened just last month. The 61-year-old allegedly fought with another inmate in the Clark County Detention Center. Just 2 days before Christmas, the former Southside Compton Crips gang member was being taken back to his housing unit when he and another inmate got into a fight, allegedly. According to a report by ABC News, the two inmates allegedly were hitting each other in the face or head, and they were both pepper sprayed, but continued to fight until they had to be separated. When asked about the fight days later, Keefe D reportedly told officers he was just standing his ground. He appeared in court on the new battery charge on Tuesday, and the bail was set for $50,000. But Keefe D already has a six-figure bail amount on the murder charge, which is why he's already in jail in the first place. Many of us know the story already. Tupac was in Vegas in '96 with Suge Knight for the Mike Tyson fight. But who also was there? Keefe D and his nephew Orlando Anderson, as well as other gang members from the Southside Crips. Orlando Anderson already had issues with members of Death Row's entourage and the rival gang Mob Piru. Both groups were leaving the fight at the MGM Hotel when members of Death Row spotted Orlando and a huge brawl broke out. Footage from that night showed Tupac kicking and punching Orlando over and over and over again. Now, this is where Keefe D allegedly steps in. Prosecutors have argued Keefe D called the shots seemingly so his nephew could get revenge. From there, the story goes, Keefe D was one of four men inside the vehicle where the shots that killed Tupac came from. And according to his own words, he passed off the gun allegedly used in Tupac's murder to his own nephew.
Yeah, he was hanging out the window. And we just came up on the gutter lane. It was like 13 cars. All of them was black, too. I guess Suge had a thing for black cars that night. So we went up on the side of him, and we seen him, and out there she wrote.
And I read in the book, you said that it looked like you guys rolled up and Pac reached.
Like he was reaching, yeah, it looked like he was ready to bust our ass. She's like, we was the first one, shit.
Yeah.
Luckiest one, I guess. Hit that corner, gave a little chase, boom, boom, boom. He got the busing, we bust back. Jumped up out that motherfucker Cadillac, put the gun on the tire, got the fuck on.
So how did you know Tupac and Suge was in the black BMW?
He was hanging out the window.
Tupac?
Yeah.
What was he doing?
He had half his body out the window. Yeah. Just, you know, that Bay Area. You know how they do. That weird like Ghost Rider whip. You know, they just want to be flamboyant. You know what I'm saying? Want to be seen and
But you said the females was yelling Tupac's name, right?
Yeah, once
That's
he
how
was
y'all
hanging out the
found
window.
out they was in the car, right?
Tupac, Tupac, and he was, you know, and, you know, a real he gonna be sitting down and set his down somewhere. You know what I'm saying? I'll be hanging out no window. Just want to be seen and
Right.
Yeah.
So so you and your crew, y'all on Flamingo and Koval, and y'all slowly pull up to Tupac and Suge in a black BMW. Tell me how that came about.
We just took the gutter lane. Like we said, we pulled up to the stoplight, and they was making a right. It was about 17 cars. We just pulled up in the gutter lane. And seen it. You know, and that first shot, it hit Big Boy in the head. I thought he was dead. Like, damn, he dead. And they didn't even give chase, make it so bad. Some brawls gave a chase. They got their little windshield shot out. It was over with after that.
Dre, he was the one that was supposed to shoot, you know, Tupac and Suge, but he got scared, right?
No, he didn't really get scared. You know, he wasn't ready for that. They was youngsters, man. Kids.
But once again, I mean, y'all Crips, right? So he should be used to that, right, Dre? So why was
He wasn't ready for that. Everybody got a role, man. Everybody ain't killers. Everybody, you know what I'm saying? Everybody ain't gonna kill.
So
everybody
Dre,
ain't
he
with
wasn't
that.
a shooter?
No.
Okay, so but he was the one that was supposed to shoot up Tupac and Suge, but for some reason he wasn't ready for it, so he gave the gun to Orlando, right?
Something like that, yeah.
And Orlando is the shooter. He's the known shooter. I mean, everybody know Orlando Anderson was a shooter. So Dre got cold feet. He didn't want to do it. He gave the gun to Orlando, and Orlando shot Tupac and Suge.
Yeah, he did his thing. Yeah.
But again, notably, Keefe D isn't accused of being the shooter. His nephew was. And we may never know what truly happened. Orlando Anderson died 2 years after Tupac's murder. The other backseat passenger, DeAndre Smith, died in 2004. And the driver, Terrence Bubble Up Brown, was killed in a 2015 shooting in Compton, California. But since those 2021 interviews, a lot has changed for Keefe D, especially when he was arrested in September of 2023, something that he likely thought was never going to happen.
It has often been said, justice delayed is justice denied. It's a quote we hear often and for many, many years when talking about our legal system, but not in this case. Today, justice will be served in the murder of Tupac Shakur. I'd like to acknowledge the relentless work of the many Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department homicide detectives. We've mentioned Detective Cliff Mogg many times, and we can't mention his name enough. He is the detective, along with his colleagues, that brought this case here today to you.
And nearly 30 years after Tupac's murder, Keefe D is set to face trial this year. Keefe D almost got out on bail after music manager Cash Jones, aka Whack 100, was ready to post bail for him.
Mr. Jones, what was the amount that you paid for the bail bond premium in this case?
112,000. It was 15% of whatever the 750 was.
Okay, that's
$112,000 and some odd dollars.
$500, is that correct?
112,500, yes sir, yes sir.
And you paid that out of your business?
Yes sir.
And what's your business name, sir?
100 Entertainment.
And you're the sole owner of that business, is that correct?
Yes sir.
And that business is a business license to do business in the state of Nevada.
Yes sir.
But a Las Vegas judge still denied Keefe D's release. Months later, Keefe D's attorney filed a motion to dismiss the murder charge altogether. His attorney cited that Keefe D's constitutional rights were violated by the state, even stating the violations were a product of a 27-year delay in prosecution, lack of corroborating evidence, and a failure to honor immunity agreements granted by federal and local authorities. Keefe D's defense added key witnesses are deceased and critical evidence has been lost, significantly impairing the fairness of any trial. That motion highlighted a previous proffer agreement between Keefe D and the feds from 2008, where he was granted immunity for information he provided in the case. Well, that agreement clearly didn't matter in the long run, because 15 years later he was arrested, charged with first-degree murder, which he has pleaded not guilty to. And it feels like this ongoing legal saga that is Dwayne Keefe D. Davis isn't letting up anytime soon. So let's unpack this now with criminal defense attorney Safa Robinson Ferrer. Safa, always great to see you. What's your reaction to Keefe D now facing another charge, this one battery by a prisoner?
It's not surprising that he's facing additional charges. Oftentimes when individuals are incarcerated and they're incarcerated for long periods of time, things happen in prison or in the jails. You know, it could have been a fight, between him and another inmate. There could have been a situation that may have escalated between him and one of the correctional officers. And so ultimately those do bring about new charges whenever an incident like that occurs. And usually the longer time that someone spends in custody, the higher the likelihood that these additional charges will come about, just because of the nature of the jail system or the prison system. It's not a great place to be. There's a lot of things that go on there, so this isn't surprising at all.
Yeah, and given that he hasn't even been tried for his alleged role in the murder of Tupac, what could this additional charge mean for his case going forward?
One of the things that can happen, what the prosecution can do with this case, is use it as leverage. A lot of times what often happens is when people have multiple charges, the DA's office might say, well, if you plead to this charge, then we'll get rid of this one. Or if you plea on one, we'll what we call satisfy the other. Or, offer some type of concurrent time as opposed to consecutive time if they plead or are found guilty on both charges. I highly doubt that the prosecution is going to back down on the murder charge, and they shouldn't. This second charge ultimately, again, could be used as leverage. They could say, if you plead guilty to the murder charge, we'll dismiss this charge. Considering that the murder is, at the forefront of this. So there's a lot of things that can happen with this, but the prosecution will use it as leverage.
Yeah. And if you think about it as well, too, this case has been ongoing for nearly 30 years at this point. Tupac was murdered in 96. The alleged shooter, Orlando Anderson, who is the nephew of Keefe D, died a few years later. And then the other two men that were in the car when all this was happening, allegedly, they're no longer here except for Keefe D. Now, his trial is slated for this year. But in your opinion, since it's been so long for the prosecution on their side, do you think that this is really a slam dunk case?
As cases near trial, and part of the reasons cases go to trial is because it's not a slam dunk case. And so ultimately, if it was that much of a quote unquote slam dunk, then oftentimes you would see individuals plead guilty to avoid, any harsher penalty that could come from trial, or what, as we lawyers call, the trial tax. And a lot of times you just never know how things are going to unfold at a trial. So, is there going to be enough proof beyond a reasonable doubt to convict Mr. Davis of this crime? Considering that witnesses have passed away, the evidence may, depending on the way it was stored, could have, possibly had some issues or destroyed. There's authentication issues, is what we call them. There's a lot of evidentiary issues that will come into play because this case is so old. So it will be interesting to see how the prosecution intends on moving forward, considering it's been this long of a time. Not to say that they can't, but it's always easier if it's nearer in time.
Mhm. And given some of those reasons you just listed there, at the beginning of this year, KPD's attorney filed a motion to dismiss all the charges because he claims KPD's constitutional rights were violated. But then a judge denied that motion. Do you think that that was kind of a last ditch effort by his attorney so that way this case wouldn't even go to trial?
So, different states have different rules with respect to our motion periods. However, it's certainly something that his attorney should have raised to ensure that they're raising each and every issue to protect Mr. Davis's constitutional rights. So his attorney has to raise that motion. As things continue to go towards trial further, there may be more motions that are filed. So it's not uncommon to see that. I don't think it's a last ditch effort. I think that this attorney is probably covering all of their bases, and we could definitely expect some more motions as trial begins to loom.
And, as a criminal defense attorney, what do you make of this immunity deal between Keefe D and the feds that happened years ago where he would offer them up information for exchange for immunity? And obviously, as far as the deal goes, obviously something kind of didn't connect there because now we know that Keefe D is behind bars. He was arrested back in 2023. But what do you make of this immunity deal that Keefe D said he had with the feds?
At the end of the day, cover your bases. If you're getting immunity, that needs to be in writing to ensure the integrity of that immunity deal. And also, we're talking about two different jurisdictions. The federal government and the federal jurisdiction is going to be separate and apart from Nevada's, jurisdiction. He's able to be laterally prosecuted, not saying that he's facing the same charges in the feds, but that immunity that he would have received from the feds, if it does exist, doesn't necessarily cover and will not necessarily cover the Nevada charges or the murder charges. And the DA's office that's prosecuting him doesn't necessarily have to honor that. And why would they? Ultimately, it's their job to protect the public, to seek justice. And if their intention is to seek justice for Tupac and the murder, then why would they not go forward and honor some type of immunity when they have an individual that they're trying to seek justice for?
Yeah, and in terms of, Tupac, the legend that is Tupac, I'm sure for his family, his friends, even for his fan base, it seems that authorities knew who was behind this murder for years. You can even kind of date it back to 2008 with that immunity agreement. But why do you think it was 2023 that an arrest was actually made?
It's really hard to say. A lot of times, what happens is, we know who did it, we know what's going on, there's rumors flying around it, but there's not enough probable cause to make that arrest. And, if you don't have that probable cause and you step in or law enforcement steps in to make an arrest, their case is going to be destroyed. They illegally or unlawfully arrested someone. There's not enough proof or to meet that burden based on the probable cause requirement for that arrest. It could ultimately damage the case later for the prosecution if the police make any missteps prior to making that arrest.
And I'm sure, just the difference in timing as well, too, probably played into a huge factor in this, and watching Keefe D in court has been kind of interesting to say the least. But in terms of him actually being on trial for murder, how do you think he'll kind of read in front of a jury? I can't imagine as a juror kind of watching this, you're thinking possibly of the image of Tupac in your head, and then you see a man in his like mid 60s on trial for this murder. Again, he's not the alleged shooter according to authorities, but what do you think that could mean or look like in front of a jury seeing, the alleged murderer of Tupac in court there?
There's going to be a few questions that this jury is going to have to decide. If Mr. Davis is not the shooter, one of the things that they're going to have to consider and determine is, are they going to find him criminally responsible or guilty under an accomplice liability theory for Tupac's murder? That is one of the things that they're going to have to consider. Some individuals are of the mindset that if you didn't pull that trigger, that you're not guilty. Some are of the mindset that if individuals, and the law will read, if you find that an individual or individuals are acting in concert to further this incident occurring, in this case a murder, then each and every individual is also responsible. But the jury is going to have to think about that question and decide that question. Not only that, but Mr. Davis, his presentation in court is going to be crucial. The jury is going to be watching him. Sometimes he can come off as very dismissive in court, which is not going to be great for the jury. You want to make sure that, you're as attentive as possible. You're as professional as possible. And one of the things we'll likely see is that he's going to have a change of clothes during the time that the trial takes place. And oftentimes there's an application made by us defense attorneys to say, hey, judge, my client is in custody. We don't want him to be brought out in prison attire or jail attire because that could prejudice the jury, make it more likely to think that he is guilty because he is in a prison uniform, which there's a psychological component to that. So we ask that he be in public clothes. But it's going to be interesting as they prepare for this case. His defense attorney and any investigators or anybody else that's working on his behalf, they're really going to want to prepare him for his courtroom presence because it doesn't come off the greatest. And in a case like this where the stakes are so high, you don't want to miss that mark.
Yeah, especially facing what could be the rest of your life in prison, given that he is charged with first-degree murder here. I can't, I guess we'll kind of have to wait and see how this all continues to play out. Safa, I want to thank you so much for your time and your insight into this. Before we sign you off, though, where do you see this actually having a conviction in this case? Or do you see possibly, if this case actually does go to trial, that it's possible there could be a hung jury there?
I always say anything is possible. I've won cases that I thought I would lose, and I've lost cases that I thought I would win. It's going to come down to what the jury thinks, what they feel. They're bringing all of their outside experiences into the courtroom. Also, this is a high-profile case with a high-profile victim. People love Tupac, and so there may be some underlying, feelings by the jurors that are going to want to seek justice on behalf of Tupac just because it's Tupac. But if they sit and listen to the evidence, they're going to have to figure out if the prosecution has met each element of each offense beyond a reasonable doubt. If the prosecution has not, especially considering the length and time, then they have to come back not guilty. But if the prosecution can meet that burden, the evidence is clear, and the jury receives it in that way, they're absolutely going to find him guilty.
Right. And again, we'll have to wait to see how this all continues to play out, as this trial could be geared away and set to go as early as the spring. Safa, again, thank you so much for your time today. I always appreciate it.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Despite that additional battery charge, Dwayne Davis, aka Keefe D, is expected to go on trial for his alleged role in Tupac's murder, and that high-profile trial is slated for March of this year.